Hello, and welcome to the commentary for Tolkien Adaptation Month. Yes, it's time to talk about the thing that I spent the past 2 months and then some working on. This was obviously a very complex project. It's probably the most complex project I've released in a very long time. Not necessarily the most complicated project I've worked on, because obviously I'm still working on the Blitz California, and that's even bigger. But this, despite the fact that production-wise, most of it was just my normal production workflow of just standing in front of the green screen or shooting things in the armchair, it was nonetheless a very elaborate project that required a lot of research and a lot of just a lot of effort put into it, because I wanted to do justice to this topic. I first had the idea to do a Tolkien adaptation month a while back. Earlier, I can't even remember now if it was early 2021 or if it was late 2020, but the podcast Newcomers, which I greatly enjoy, Lauren Lapkus and Nicole Byers' podcast, where they watch franchises they've never seen before and are basically thrown into the deep end of franchises they haven't watched yet. And they usually end up not really enjoying the franchises, but I still enjoy them because they are two of the funniest people in the world. I really enjoy that podcast, and they did a season on Lord of the Rings, which is a big, overwhelming thing to be thrown into the deep end of when you've never encountered Lord of the Rings. The producers of the podcast didn't make them read any of the books, but they made them watch all 6 Jackson movies and all the animated movies and listen to some of the radio broadcasts and see some clips from video games and stuff. So it was a pretty deep dive, and, they did not emerge from it fans of Lord of the Rings. But listening to them go through the animated movies especially just reminded me of how much there is to unpack in all the various Tolkien adaptations out there. But it wasn't until a little later, earlier this year, that another podcast started, a podcast called Ringheads, that Bill Corbett from MST3K and Riff Tracks and Sean Thomason from Riff Tracks were doing a Lord of the Rings revisiting podcast together. And they were the ones who reminded me, like, in the first episode of that podcast, they reminded me that the 20th anniversary of the Fellowship movie was coming up. And I was like, okay, if I'm going to do a Tolkien adaptation month, it really should be for the 20th anniversary of Fellowship. So it was probably late spring, early summer that I first started thinking, okay, I'm going to aim for November to be Tolkien adaptation month. But I found on archive.org a fan-produced audiobook that I was just listening to for a couple months. And yeah, it was a fan-produced audiobook using the soundtrack and the sound effects from the movies. A guy named Phil Dragash, or Dragash, I'm not sure how you say his name, but this guy put it together, does all the voices, like impersonates the actors from the movies, but it's the unabridged text of the books. So it's a fun, like, marriage of the movie world and the original text world, which, like, if someone were to animate this unabridged fan-produced audiobook, like, I would be in heaven. But but yeah, I re-listened to that for a few months, and as I was gathering my notes for the various scripts, and I rewatched the movies. I rewatched the extended editions, all of the commentaries on the extended editions, and all of the appendices in the extended editions, taking notes all the way for things I wanted to draw attention to, or especially things where they addressed my nitpicks, because I was like, I borrowed my family's copy of the DVDs because I didn't own my own copies, because in the house growing up my family just had them. But my family couldn't find their original release of the extended edition of Two Towers, so I needed to buy a copy of that myself, of specifically the original release, because the re-releases did not have all the original bonus features. And I needed the commentaries because I needed to hear Peter and Fran and Philippa explain themselves when it came to Faramir. Because it's actually really funny. The Two Towers commentary, like, so much of it is just them justifying the changes they made, because that's the book that they changed the most. And it's like I keep saying, I understand how they got to these decisions, but that doesn't mean I always think they were the right decisions. The first script that I finished a real draft of was the Armchair Imagineering one, because I wanted to shoot that. I like to shoot Armchair Imagineerings in bulk whenever possible, because I shoot those at my parents' house in their living room. And since I do not live in my parents' house anymore, it's an inconvenience to everyone to have to head over there and set it up, and like I have to make sure my family like isn't needing the living room that day or anything. So I shot that at the same time as I shot the Back to the Future Armchair Imagineering, and I talked about this on the podcast a while back. I talked about this shortly after it happened, but that was the day that my parents' cat, Phantom, refused to come back in the house, and by the time he finally came back inside at night, a possum also entered, and, I was done shooting by 4, but I didn't get to go home until, like, 10, just because I was waiting on the cat to cooperate. Shout out to Dom here, who was another of the early things. Like, when Dom did this video about the coolest character left out of Lord of the Rings, that was one of the other things that was aiding along my returning Tolkien hyperfixation. But of course, all of this deep dive, and of course Dom himself shows up in the video in a little bit, which we'll get to shortly. But all of this Tolkien deep dive was also coming at a time where it's like I had other projects to work on, I had other things to do, I had to make actual money, and of course Scary Farm was coming up, and if I had my druthers, I would have made sure this production was all done by the time Scary Farm started. But, of course, we don't always get what we want, the best laid plans, etc., etc. Here we have the beginning of the support group sketch, which was a sketch that there will be an extended edition of. There are many characters in this that you haven't even seen yet, and there are some characters we haven't even filmed yet. But there will someday be an extended edition of the sketch, and that, of course, is the great Erica Haynes as Farmer Maggot's wife. Erica, our dear friend, you know her, among many other things. You've seen her as J.K. Rowling in Tony's Harry Potter video, back before we knew J.K. Rowling was not to be admired. Back before she made it so blatant that, like, oh, she's actually awful. At one point, what I wanted to do was reread and re-listen to the books again, but do it chapter by chapter, scene by scene, with the equivalent scenes in the movies, so I could, like, get really in the grain about things that were changed. So I actually cut together versions of the movies. I cut together just every subplot. Like I cut together a video that was just a cut of all of Merry and Pippin scenes in Two Towers, and then a cut of just all of Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli scenes, and then just all of Frodo, Gollum, and Sam scenes. And my plan was to go chapter by chapter and, like, read the chapter, watch the movie clip that adapts that chapter, and I made it basically about to the end of the Treebeard chapter in my revisiting of that before I was like, I am out of time, I need to just write. So if I had gotten through that whole process, I might have found even more nitpicks I had forgotten about that I wanted to include in this list. But this video was long enough as is, so it's not like it needed more nitpicks. I'm sure any additional nitpicks I would have found would have just been wildly petty ones, like the early ones in this video. This entry about the sexification, by the way, I need to thank my brother Nick for helping me put this into words, because I was making the observation to him about how they flip around Aragorn's personality. Like, they make him confident in areas where he's insecure, and then they make him insecure in areas where he's confident in the book. And Nick was like, yeah, because being confident about your destiny, but being insecure in your immediate goals isn't sexy. And I was like, that's it exactly. Thank you for thank you for helping me figure that out, Nick. So yeah, I basically last week of October is when I'm doing most of the filming for this. And then to get it ready for Patreon, I pulled an all-nighter the night of October 30th, going into Halloween the next day, before my last day of Scary Farm. I pulled an all-nighter to get this all ready for Patreon, and yeah, then I was eventually able to take like an hour-long nap at like 2 p.m. before I had to go in for my final night of Scary Farm. So it was a bit of a whirlwind of a final night, you could say. I was just a tad loopy, but yeah, I do not recommend pulling all-nighters to get videos done ever. I do not recommend pulling all-nighters in general. My sleep schedule is fucked up enough as is. I have various undiagnosed sleep issues in addition to my undiagnosed attention deficit issues and my general undiagnosed neurodivergences. I should figure out what makes me tick as a person, but that sounds complicated. So anyway, here's the support group sketch with Dom split screened as the two sons of Elrond. He is wearing slightly different colored jackets as each son, and I don't think anyone can actually tell. To produce the support group sketches, I spent, the back half of October just raiding every Spirit Halloween, every Halloween club, every Party City, every Halloween store in a certain radius, just finding everything that looked vaguely medieval. There's not a lot of like on-brand Lord of the Rings costumes, and even if there were, they would only be for characters in the movies. So specifically doing them for characters not in the movies would not have been a would not have been useful. But yeah, I already had accumulated a bit of a wig collection, and then I added to it. Ears was the tricky part because I found various pointy ears of various types and various levels of quality, but none of them great quality. The ears that Erica is wearing are actually officially branded Legend of Zelda Link ears that are a child size, but Erica was able to fit in them. And then the ears that Dom is wearing were large elf ears that you're supposed to like spirit gum to your cheeks, but we just sort of tucked them under the wig, and that made them work as well as necessary for YouTube comedy. Internet sketch, the standards aren't necessarily, they didn't need to be the highest, but I wanted to put some level of effort into it. I didn't want the joke to be, look how cheap it is. I knew some level of cheapness would be forgiven, but I did not want the gag to be, haha, look at these shitty costumes, any more than it absolutely had to be. My buddy Landon did comment on the video, making the fair point that having the scouring could undermine this other essential piece of the arc where they are changed by the horrors of war. Having the hobbits come back and save the Shire and make it better to live in and be hailed as heroes might undermine the they can't really come home narrative, at least if handled poorly. And yeah, that is a fair point. It may have, even if the two themes of the ending could coexist, one of them might step on the other one. And so it wasn't necessarily the wrong choice for a movie to only focus on one of those two themes. I just wish that it hadn't come at the expense of the important theme that, the evil would end up corrupting the whole world. Because I feel like it, I feel like showing the Shire unaffected really makes it seem like the Ents had a point when they were like, hey, it doesn't affect us, so why should we get involved? Which the previous movie went out of its way to craft a whole arc to say they don't have a point. It went out of its way to give them that point, only to prove that point wrong. when that was a point they never arrived at in the book. So I can understand cutting the scouring for time. I can understand cutting the scouring to focus on the other pieces of the arc. I understand all that. I accept that. I just wish they hadn't shown the Shire being completely unchanged. I wish, like, if they had cut from the journey home to just the scene of them at the Green Dragon, that would have worked fine. Like, I could have had the headcanon that it happened off camera, that the scouring happened off camera, or that the real damage to the Shire was done off camera. I could accept that headcanon and go on my merry way. Again, when you consider the arduous pre-production and production and everything of this movies, it's kind of a miracle they are watchable, let alone masterpieces. Like, I don't want to undermine what an amazing achievement the movies are, and I've been appreciating it even more as I was rewatching all the DVD features and re-listening to all the commentaries, and how, like, things had to be rewritten, things had to be, you know, like with every movie production, things have to be rewritten and reshot last minute, and it's like they always hint at, like one of the big things that all the DVD features hint at is that there was originally a version of the story where Arwen was at Helm's Deep, and there's like maybe one shot left in the movie where you can see Arwen there, and I just have no idea how that would have worked narratively, because, like, so much of the Aragorn Arwen story as presented in the movie is about them not being together, and having Arwen just show up, how is that going to work? Like, it would have restructured the entire rest of the movie, and the entire rest of the trilogy would have been completely reformatted if that happened. And I am just curious to get my hands on a draft of the script from when that was the plan, because yeah, I'm curious. So yeah, here's the animated trilogy video, the longest obsession of the moment I've ever released, possibly the longest I ever will, who knows. And the longest video of Tolkien Adaptation Month by a long shot, and after this, the videos get shorter and shorter. So this is just foreshadowing for the Blitz Travafornia, where there will be videos of wildly different lengths depending on how much material a land gave me from day to day. I wish there was more behind-the-scenes information about these movies. I wish the DVDs had, like, actual features, like deleted scenes or documentaries or anything. Like, even the Bakshi DVD, it has the documentary, but it's not a very in-depth documentary. I cut to a lot of clips from it in this video, but it is not... It's an okay featurette where, you know, for the DVD, they got Bakshi and some of the crew together to talk to them, but it doesn't have a lot of, like, actual behind-the-scenes footage. It cuts to a lot of, like, public domain educational film footage for B-roll, which is an interesting choice. I also didn't know this until I was researching this episode. I did not know that the books were ever in the public domain. That was, like, a wild discovery for me. It explained a lot, though. Like, it was surprising to me that the books were ever in the public domain, but then it was surprising to me that there weren't more unauthorized Hobbit, Lord of the Rings adaptations in the process. But yeah, I did not know that the books were in the public domain in the U.S. I had known about the sort of circumstances that led them to the public domain with the bootleg copies and everything. I knew about that from the documentary Ringer's Lord of the Fans, which I used some footage of, because that documentary, which was produced by theonering.net, and not narrated by Dominic Monaghan. That was the documentary I bought on DVD years ago. And I used some footage from it later because it is the only good B-roll I've been able to find of Hobbiton USA back when that existed. The time my family discovered it, we did videotape it, but that was on my old like Sharp view cam, so that was on high 8 tapes, which are probably unplayable, at least by any device I have. That clip was from the Tolkien Sarcasm pages, quote-unquote complete movie version of Lord of the Rings, which is redubbing 40s movies as a bad Lord of the Rings adaptation. It's one of my favorite things ever. It is one of my favorite, early internet video. It's as someone who loved Tolkien and loved Bogart movies in high school, it was like the perfect Venn diagram of my interests. Definitely watched the whole thing. The whole thing is brilliant and clever, but of course the PA Stay Resistance is towards the end of the video, Peter Lorre as Gollum. It's like, how can you go wrong with that? The original upload I did of this, which was identical to the version of this that was in the Patreon preview, got blocked worldwide for using a few too many seconds of the Hobbit cartoon. I don't know why that one got blocked worldwide when the Patreon preview didn't. I don't understand how that works at all. But it also didn't get blocked immediately upon upload the way the YouTube copyright bots usually do. It got blocked a little later, so I was like, huh, well, that's weird. But I can I can trim this bit down, make some more cuts here, and hopefully that will take care of it. And fortunately, that did take care of that. And then I was making other tweaks, just other creative tweaks, adding in pickup shots and adding in the Glorfindel scene and everything. And then that version got blocked for using a few too many seconds from Return of the King, which seemed particularly insulting because that's the cartoon nobody particularly likes. I mean, I like it. I think it's fascinating. But that's like I say in this video, that's the black sheep of this trilogy. So it seemed like insult to injury to have that be the one that was blocked when it's like, especially when like entire scenes from the cartoon are uploaded just as is. The entire Where There's a Whip There's a Way scene is available on YouTube unblocked. So I don't know what's going on there. But so then I tweaked the scene that got blocked. I trimmed it, and this was like down to the wire. This was going up. Allie and I were up in Santa Ynez and Solvang for our anniversary, and I was in the cabin making tweaks and uploading the final version. And this was Saturday, which was the day of our anniversary proper. I uploaded the version that I had just tweaked, and then we went into Solvang to celebrate our anniversary. I had already queued the video for Premiere and everything, and then when I was in Solvang, when we were out and about, that's when I got the email that it was once again blocked for a completely different scene from Return of the King, which apparently the first video to get blocked for the one scene, like the other scene didn't bother them, but now a second scene bothered them. So I was like, honey, I hate to do this. I need to go back to our cabin for just like an hour to make some tweaks and re-upload a video, and hope to fuck that one doesn't get blocked between the time I upload it and the time the video premieres. It was very frustrating, but fortunately I have the most patient and understanding wife in the universe, and fortunately it didn't end up taking too much time to fix the scene and re-render it and re-upload it. So then we went back into Solvang and spent the rest of our anniversary day proper and had a lovely time. The concept art in this book is the closest I've come to finding real behind-the-scenes information from The Hobbit, and I don't know how much of it is genuine. I don't know how much of it is authentic. One thing I don't mention in this video is that The Hobbit had a Disneyland Records read-along book and record. From the same line as all those Disney read-along books and tapes. Disneyland Records put out the read-along on this abridged version of The Hobbit. Like, I would love to get my hands on one of those and like read a storybook, an abridged storybook of the abridged cartoon of the book that's already a children's book. I don't know how easy to find those are. I haven't like looked very hard for them. I have a lot of issues with the pacing of this movie that I don't really go into, and part of it is like it rushes through some plot points, which is necessary because, you know, to condense this down to even to 3 movies, to condense it down, you got to abridge some things. But I do take issue, like, something I realized after the fact I should have put a little more focus on is in rushing through these things, they kind of skim over characters' emotional reactions a lot of the time. There are a couple of good moments of, like, character emotion peppered throughout the movie, but it's like the Tolkien Sarcasm page recap referred to a lot of the issues of this movie as Tolkien's greatest hits, where it does like all the cool lines of dialogue from the book, but none of the connecting tissue that makes it matter, which I don't think is entirely fair, but I think there is something to be said for the fact that the movie is kind of rushing from moment to moment and not letting any of the moments breathe, or the characters' reactions to the moments breathe. And that's one of the reasons I realized after the fact, one of the reasons I think Return of the King, one of the things it does better is focusing on the character reactions to their environments and their situations, focusing, like, especially for Sam, focusing on his and Sam and Frodo, both of them, but especially Sam, focusing on their stress and their exhaustion and their reactions to everything better than any of the hobbits in the Bakshi movie, and I would say better than Bilbo in Rankin Bass's The Hobbit. Like, and some of it is just because they were rushing the adaptation more and scaling it down even more. It's like this sort of Bungie effect where they scale the plot down so much that they have room to flesh out the character moments within the plot. An interesting way that's handled. But that's why, like, I think the best moments in the animated Return of the King, like, come from the characters living in their world and reacting to it. And obviously some characters don't get the luxury. Aragorn, all of his stuff gets rushed, the titular king gets minimized. But for the hobbits, and again, if they're doing this as a sequel to The Hobbit, it makes sense that they're focusing on the hobbits and giving the hobbits room to emote and react that they don't have nearly as much of in the Bakshi movie. It's again, I don't think Return of the King is necessarily better than the Bakshi movie, but that is one of the areas I think it kind of improves on things. So here we have the Return of the Support Group sketch. Like I said, my friend Garrett Smith, a really good actor as Glorfindel. I felt really bad because, like, I give him this, like, long, unwieldy line with all these, like, very specific Tolkien names and all this lore and all this exposition, basically. And, you know, he's not the deep Tolkien nerd. Like, he's not deep into Tolkien, so not all of these terms were super familiar to him. And it took several takes to get through the thing, but God, he was great. So good, and very patient with me. But I felt bad about giving him this line. Yeah, he nailed it. It took a while, but he nailed it. And yeah, like I said, this was the whole impetus behind the support group sketch, because I wanted to acknowledge that, like, okay, conflating, reducing characters by eliminating Glorfindel, that's fine. But replacing him with an entirely different type of elf is odd. And there's Rosen as Erkenbrand. Erkenbrand, for anyone who doesn't know, is the character, is the leader of the group of Riders of Rohan that Gandalf shows up with at the end of Helm's Deep in the book. But of course, in the movie, it's Éomer. In the Jackson movie, it's Éomer. And in the Bakshi movie, you just see him with a bunch of riders. You don't see any of them named. But in that other clip, Gandalf says he's going to find Éomer. So in both movies, Erkenbrand's role goes to Éomer. But of course, in the Bakshi movie, the whole scene, the movie ends basically the second Gandalf and the riders show up. So maybe Erkenbrand's still there. You never know. I realized after the fact that I could have turned this video into a whole month itself. I could have done an introductory video on the Tolkien animated trilogy, and then a video on The Hobbit, and a video on the Bakshi movie, and a video on Return of the King. I could have split this easily into 4 videos without really rewriting it much at all from this script. I could have filled up the whole month just with this. If you split this into parts, each part is about the length of a normal obsession of the moment. I had too many other topics I wanted to cover during Tolkien Adaptation Month, so I couldn't spend the entire month just on the cartoons. But I don't know, it might have been better for pacing, but who knows? What's done is done. I am happy with this video. I'm happy with this whole month. I'm happy with how all this turned out. But I am particularly happy with how this video turned out. I think this is a solid one, even if it's a little incohesive. But hey, so is the trilogy it's about. If anything, that's just tonally appropriate. And yeah, this was when I found this revisiting the book, and found that both of these Tolkien wikis have, they both claim that this character was invented whole cloth for the cartoon, and it's like, guys, right there in the text. Maybe it's a different minstrel. Maybe you could say the character as mentioned in the text is not enough of a character to definitively be claimed to be the same character in the movie, but has the same song title and is described Minstrel of Gondor the exact same way. I cannot imagine that the character exists for any reason other than to be an adaptation of this non-character from the book. If he was an original character invented from whole cloth, why would they say he was the Minstrel of Gondor? Why not have him just be an elf in Rivendell singing the song? It is definitely based on this mentioned minstrel in the book, and yeah, those wikis just completely overlooked that. So now we get to the BBC Radio video, and this was an idea, this was on the short list for Obsession of the Moments basically since I started the series Obsession of the Moment. This was on the list of things I wanted to cover someday, and I knew I was going to frame it as my favorite adaptation of The Hobbit and have the title card be, crossing out the filmed adaptations, and, I wanted to build to the reveal of what this adaptation would be. I had this idea, since I was originally brainstorming in, years ago, not quite, but almost a decade ago. when I was initially brainstorming a list of topics, potential topics for Obsession of the Moment, one of the first topics I put on the list was the BBC radio adaptation of The Hobbit, and framing it as my favorite adaptation of The Hobbit, and just going into how nostalgic I am for it and how much I enjoy it. And then I just never got around to doing it until until I was prepping Tolkien Adaptation Month. I was like, great, I still have this idea on the back burner. This is the perfect time to use it. I still haven't found any evidence of if Tolkien ever heard this or what he thought of it if he did. Someone named Sam Minden said in the chat during the premiere that they seem to recall reading somewhere that Tolkien was not a fan of this, but could not remember specifically if this was what that was referring to. But I wouldn't be surprised. I feel like Tolkien would have been very hard to please with adaptations. When you have an entire universe in your head, other people aren't going to be able to do justice to how you imagine it, no matter how hard they try, no matter how good a job they do. I know there have also been, there's been stage versions of The Hobbit, there's been other radio versions of The Hobbit, but, I'm not going to definitively say this is definitely better than all of those are. Maybe I'll find a new favorite version of The Hobbit. But this is tough to beat. I really think the only actual criticisms I have about this are some of the weird pronunciations, and it would have been nice to have the couple of comedy scenes that it doesn't have. And, it would be nice if the narration didn't rush through a few plot points. But it's just so well done. It's just so well produced. I'm just basically spending this commentary just gushing over this radio broadcast like I did in the video. You can probably tell I'm not recording this commentary all in one sitting. In fact, I was recording much of it in traffic, so I am a little scatterbrained as I am sharing information and trying to keep track of what I've already talked about and what I haven't yet. But yeah, I think I pretty clearly shared all my thoughts about this radio production in the video proper, so I'm being redundant by just continuing to talk about how much I love it. It's dismissive to refer to Tolkien's themes as Luddite. It's reductive. I'm aware, but it's broadly speaking the best word I could think of to describe the anti-industrialization bent. But I don't know. And of course, that is just a Saruman Funko Pop superimposed over. I believe at the time of that footage, that was Mickey's Fun Wheel. That was some of my old footage from when it was Paradise Pier. And we got Knott's and Disneyland footage there in a line that I did not have in the original video and didn't have in the original shoot, and I had to re-record later in an audio pickup just for clarity. This blueprint / animatic of the ride, I finished the day before this video went up. It's probably the most complicated thing the most complicated single sequence I put together in a video in a very long time. I hand drew all the sort of elements and, scanned them in, colored them in, cleaned them up, duplicated many of them, and then animated this all in Final Cut. The characters are hand-drawn. Anything that's like a shape is just made in Final Cut. Anything that's a straight line or a circle or a rectangle, that's just using Final Cut Shape Tool and manipulating it until it crafts the shape of a blueprint or a. I just realized my Beorn looks more like Captain Haddock from Tintin. That's not deliberate. Um, but yeah, these are, not great artwork because I'm not a great artist, but hand drawing a lot of elements, hand drawing a single dwarf and duplicating it with different colors a lot. But I wanted to convey the sense, like, I saw so clearly in my head what these, like, simple animatronic versions of a lot of these scenes would look like, and I wanted to convey it. And at one point early on, at the time I shot the Armchair Imagineering, which again was months earlier, there was part of me that was like, I wonder if I can build a model, like build a scale model of this fake ride with like figurines and everything in it and use that. So I left myself open to the possibility of doing that, but knowing deep down that I would never actually have the time and energy to piece that together, and knowing ultimately that it would probably just be drawings, or even just editing clips together. But I wanted it to be drawings. I wanted it to be original creation because I didn't want to just show footage of the other adaptations right after I say this isn't based on any of the movies. Except for when I wanted to drive a point home, like the chip the glasses. But I didn't want it to just be the chip the glasses footage. I really wanted to convey how it would work as a ride, like with animatronics and figures, and not just like, here's the scene I'm talking about. So I hope that came across well. It's something that I would like to do in Armchair Imagineering more often. Actual, original visual representation of the ride I have in my head. But it took so long to piece together. I didn't have it ready in that all-nighter I pulled to put it on Patreon. And in fact, I didn't have it ready until the day before the video premiered, like I said. And basically, like, mere hours before I did that live stream the night before. Anyway, I am happy that I got to do this Tolkien Adaptation Month, and I'm happy that you all seem to enjoy it. I got almost universally good feedback from it, and it got good discussion going in the comments and everything, and in the chats. And this was kind of a swing for me in the sense that this is not the type of, like, I've referenced Tolkien a lot in videos and stuff, but I haven't devoted full videos to Tolkien before, other than the vlog my dad and my brother and I did when I first saw The Hobbit, and enjoyed it well enough upon first viewing. But yeah, this has not been a focus of my channel before, so I'm glad everyone stuck with me for this, and I'm glad everyone really seemed to enjoy this. It was exhausting, hopefully next year I won't have to pull another all-nighter. Next year I'm aiming to get Tolkien Adaptation Month, like, close to done by, like, August. I'm already starting now writing next year's Tolkien Month, basically. But, yeah, I'm glad everyone enjoyed this, and I hope everyone enjoys next year's Tolkien Month too, and all the less complicated things I do between now and then. So thank you for joining me, and until next time, this is Dave, signing off.